I'm diving deep into history to uncover the real spark that ignited the American Revolution. Can I piece together the puzzle? In this video, you will explore the events and ideas that ignited the American Revolution, setting the stage for a fight for independence. The relationship between the American colonies and British authorities was becoming increasingly strained. The British government was imposing its will on the colonies, taxing them without their consent, and restricting their economic growth. This led to growing tensions between the two, as the colonies felt their rights as Englishmen were being violated. The British government saw the colonies as mere subjects, to be exploited for their resources and labor. This fundamental disagreement over the colonies' place in the empire was the spark that lit the flame of revolution. The colonies had grown and prospered under British rule, but they were no longer willing to be treated as second-class citizens. They began to demand representation in Parliament, and an end to the oppressive taxation policies that were strangling their economies. The British government, however, was unwilling to listen, and this led to a series of events that would change the course of history. One of the key grievances of the colonies was the Navigation Acts, which restricted their trade and commerce. The British government wanted to keep the colonies in a state of economic subservience, and the Navigation Acts were designed to achieve this. The acts prohibited the colonies from trading with other nations, and forced them to buy goods from Britain at inflated prices. This led to widespread smuggling and evasion, as the colonies sought to circumvent the restrictions. The British government responded with harsh penalties, including the seizure of ships and goods, and the imprisonment of colonists who dared to defy their rules. This only added to the growing sense of resentment and anger among the colonists who felt they were being treated like criminals in their own land. The Quartering Act was another major source of contention. This act allowed British soldiers to be stationed in the colonies, and forced the colonists to provide them with food and shelter. The colonists saw this as an infringement on their rights, and resented being forced to quarter large numbers of soldiers in their homes and communities. They saw it as a further example of British oppression, and a threat to their way of life. The presence of British soldiers also led to clashes and violence, as the colonists and soldiers had different cultural values and customs. This only added to the growing sense of tension and hostility between the two. The Stamp Act was a major turning point in the lead-up to the Revolution. This act imposed a tax on all printed materials, including newspapers, pamphlets, and even playing cards. The colonists saw this as a direct attack on their freedom of speech and assembly, and they responded with widespread protests and boycotts. The act was eventually repealed, but it had a lasting impact on the colonies and helped to galvanize opposition to British rule. The colonists realized that they had the power to resist British oppression, and this realization gave them the courage to take further action. The Boston Tea Party was another key event that contributed to the growing tensions between the colonies and Britain. In 1773, a group of colonists disguised as Native Americans boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and threw cargoes of tea into the water. This was a bold and brazen act of defiance, and it sent a clear message to the British government: the colonies would no longer be pushed around. The British government responded with harsh penalties, including the closure of the port of Boston and the quartering of troops in the city. This only added to the growing sense of hostility and resentment among the colonists, and helped to drive them further towards revolution. The Intolerable Acts were a series of laws passed by the British government in response to the Boston Tea Party. These acts were designed to punish the colonies and assert British authority. They included the closure of the port of Boston, the quartering of troops in the city, and the revocation of Massachusetts' charter. The colonies saw these acts as a direct attack on their rights and freedoms, and they responded with widespread outrage and defiance. The acts helped to galvanize opposition to British rule and drove the colonies further towards revolution. In 1774, the First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, marking a decisive step towards unified resistance against British rule. Delegates from 12 colonies attended the Congress, and they issued a declaration of rights and grievances. The Congress also called for a boycott of British goods, and established a committee to enforce the boycott. This was a powerful statement of intent, and it showed that the colonies were willing to take drastic action to assert their rights. The British government saw the Congress as a direct challenge to its authority, and it responded with force. The First Continental Congress was a turning point in the lead-up to the Revolution. It showed that the colonies were willing to work together to achieve their goals, and that they were prepared to resist British oppression. The Congress also helped to galvanize public opinion, and to create a sense of unity and purpose among the colonies. It was a powerful symbol of resistance, and it paved the way for the Declaration of Independence in 1776. In summary, the American Revolution was sparked by a series of events and ideas that highlighted the colonies' grievances against British rule. The revolution was a long time coming, and it was driven by a desire for independence, self-governance, and economic freedom. The spark that ignited the revolution was the growing tensions between the colonies and Britain. And the key events that contributed to this spark were the Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, and the Intolerable Acts. What do you think sparked the American Revolution? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out my other videos on American history for more insights.